Get Warrior Tough, Mental Training 101 with Andrew Wittman and Dutch Coleman. And now back to Andrew and Dutch.
All right, we're back at it, burning brain cells by the second, so we got to jump back in. So at birth, we have 2,500 synapses. There's 2,500 connections. At 3 years old, we have 15,000 of these connections. Now, the adult brain, this is what now, how many you have is based on what you do with your brain after you get from 3 years old to the adulthood. And a lot of stuff goes into this, Dutch. It's not just, your nutrition and your sleep and your physical activity, substance abuse, right? How all these things go into it, and your education, how much cognitive processing that you actually did. So you're creating all these connections. By the time we get to an adult and we stop going to school, this is what happens. You use it or lose it. 50% of the neurons do not survive in adulthood because as rarely used connections, what happened through adolescence, they get eliminated.
That's powerful, man. It makes me harken back to all the different promotions that they have about even as simple as, this is your brain on drugs.
Yeah.
So what you're saying is being supported by some of the things that we've heard in the past, but it was never from a scientific standpoint as a fact. It was almost like an innuendo or some slight information that was passing by. So I'm loving this every time I hear new information like this. So this isn't my first time, but I'm trying to speak for the people out there. They should be loving hearing this information.
Right, and then there's another study that went with it, and this comes from New England Journal of Medicine, that they had this thing called like the dinosaur effect. So it was like the more weight you put on, the smaller your brain actually gets. So you're losing even more of these connections the heavier you get. And it's not just obesity. I mean, that's why there's that kind of the stereotype of the big, jock guy that's kind of dumb, right? You know what I mean? Like that guy's just kind of thick, because that's what happens. The bigger your mass is on your body, like the smaller your brain connections actually get. So that's the kind of the average, how it works, 2,500 to 15,000, and then we start losing them in adulthood because when you don't use it, you lose it. Now, what they have discovered, here's the good news. That's the yucky news. Let's not hang out there. This thing called, right, I don't want to hang out there. Neurogenesis, right, which is the production of new neurons and new connections, right? So, and there was research that found that, and this is in 1999 at the Salk Institute in San Diego, they actually discovered there was neurogenesis taking place in a 72-year-old man. So they were tracking this guy, and they're like, oh my gosh, he's getting more connections and more neurons. So listen, there's hope that we can repair like some of these, and I, a lot of guys that I've, served with, a bunch of them, we call it getting your brain bucket rattled, right? When you're in an IED explosion or something like that, or it's called TBI, traumatic brain injury. And, that's a big thing with football too, with concussions and stuff. So there is hope that they could figure out that they're trying to figure out. They know it works, but we don't know how to create new stuff even in adulthood, but we know it can happen. So that's what we're working on. And there are some things that we can do to make it happen. They're just looking for the quick fix. That's not what you and I do. We do the process, and it's a lifelong journey, which includes sleep and nutrition, hormones, and, setting targets, doing the process, thinking critically, all those things.
Absolutely. It's funny that, again, I'm picturing this brain that was not being used or not being fired up as you're losing these things, and then you find an opportunity or a way to fire it up or to relight it or reignite it, like you're giving a car a jump, you're hooking it up to something. So you're introducing it to new processes. You're giving it new information, giving it things to liven it up again, or to, what do you call it? Give it a spark.
Yeah,
that's what I imagine when you gave the example about the older gentleman.
Well, I'm hoping it does. All right, so now this is the thing. This is where we're getting into the nuts and bolts of it right here. Okay, so there's these things called pathways, neuropathways. Think about it like highways, super highways in your brain. So as these neurons all connect, when you do a task or you think a thought or you do a memory, so what happens is that these connections start to make a pattern, and it's almost like clearing a path, and then it's like paving a road, and the more traffic that you have on it, right, the wider the lanes are. So it's going to be like going through like Atlanta when it's like 12 wide, not just some little path down a country road. So the neural pathways, they connect distant areas of the brain to the nervous system, and each pathway is associated with a particular action or behavior. And every time we think or we feel or we do something, we strengthen this pathway. And habits are just well-traveled highways, neural pathways. That's all habits are. We're comfortable with it. It's just like, think about every time you brush your teeth, do you use your left hand or your right hand, Dutch?
Ooh, my right hand.
Yeah, and I use my left hand. Now, just to flip there, now that's just, we don't even think about it because that's the neural pathway. It's an autopilot meta program just to brushing the teeth. If you want to create a new neural pathway, what you do is you flip hands, and so you use your right hand, and the first time it feels really weird because it's a new thought, it's a new skill, and now I've got a trailblaze. There's no pathway there. I'm like with a guy with a machete going through the jungle hacking vines, right, just brushing my teeth with my right hand, creating a new pathway. But when I do it a second time, and then a third time, and then a fifth time, and then I just do it for say 12 weeks, that's our magic number around here. If we did it for 12 weeks, now that new path becomes a super highway.
That is very interesting. I hadn't thought about that. I hadn't even considered that. But that information is a weapon. I mean, that's something where you can create abilities and create talents for yourself. And when you already know that it's possible from a scientific standpoint, then that gives you the strength, that gives you the willingness to stick to it, in which we always preach. This isn't something we're just saying for a radio show. We teach this. So when Andrew said the 12 weeks, that was by design.
Yeah.
So when you commit to something and you have the scientific information backing what you believe, then you're more prone to stick with it instead of just because somebody told you.
Right. So when we have our that physical process of thinking like crap, right, and all of our clients know what we're talking about. That's our critical thinking matrix, how we think every thought, right? That's an actual physical process of how to think every thought. After about 12 weeks, now we've made it so it's natural, just like brushing your teeth. Okay, and with repeated and direct attention towards a desired change, listen to me, with repeated and direct, that means focused, concentrated, conscious, a deliberate action and attention towards the desired change, we all have the ability to rewire our brains, stop with it's just how I am wired, that's just how I am, that's just how it is, and I'm just being honest.
It's not because Andrew and Dutch told you that. It's backed by science.
Yeah, I'm not trying to convince you of anything. I'm just telling you what is, right? And we say this all the time too, right? You're probably sick of hearing me say it. The earth is not flat, it's round. I'm not trying to convince you of that. You could continue to believe it's flat. It won't help you any, but the earth is round, and I'm not trying to convince you. I'm just telling you what is.
Absolutely. I love it.
All right. So now here's the next thing. After we have these neural pathways carved out, you guys have heard me talk about the hormone dump, right? If you pick your truth, you pick how you perceive a thing, and then you get the hormone dump. And then how long, Dutch, do the hormones stay in your system?
20 minutes.
20 minutes before it'll leave your system. So it hits your bloodstream, it goes into your system. Now, this is what happens is when the reward and pleasure center, when you see something and you say, man, I really liked that. That ice cream, that cake was so good, I'm going to remember that in the future. Or whether it was you were at the beach or you were with a person, and you had a good time at a concert, whatever it is, that thing that made you said, man, I had a really good time, you liked it, and that went to the reward center of your brain. The hormone that they say, hey, look, we like this, then the hormone comes, and that hormone is called dopamine. You heard of that before, right, Dutch?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, man, everybody likes I'm all doped up, right? It's dopamine. So that's the natural thing. That's the natural feel-good hormone. So you do, whether it's eating that favorite food at the favorite restaurant, the favorite song, all those things. That's why I turn up certain songs, because I activate the reward center. I said, I like this, and my body says, yep, we like it, and then it gives me the dopamine dump. And then my hippocampus, that's a part of my brain, my hippocampus, that takes care of it and lays down a memory track in there. It says, yep, let's remember this. It lays down a memory track, and that makes me want to eat more or hear the song more or go back to the beach more or whatever it was that made me feel good and get the dopamine. Then I want to do that again because I felt good. Is this making sense?
Oh, yeah. This is all familiar. I mean, this is all familiar to a lot of people listening. They haven't made the connection. So what you're doing, you're making connections to what people have heard in passing and to what they've been taught to believe. And also all you're doing is connecting what you've heard to what's a fact. You're clearing out all the nonsense that surrounds, the facts. And so you're creating a pathway right now.
Right. And so here's the reward pathway. It's once your brain is activated, the reward center of your brain is activated. The brain, and then it floods with the dopamine. We feel good, and then we seek to repeat the activity. And the more that you repeat it, remember what I said about neural pathways. The first time you did it, it's like blazing a trail with that machete. You're going through the jungle. You're hacking. After about the 12th time, it's a superhighway, like 7 lanes wide on each side in a traffic jam. This is what happens when you get addicted to something. Your brain is literally hijacked because you want that dopamine release so bad that you'll do whatever the essential behaviors are to get there. And it actually, you reroute out of the, it trumps the cerebral cortex, which is the executive part of the brain, the genius part of your brain, the one that makes good decisions, that balanced, good judgment decisions based on reason and logic. It just bypasses that. And now you have, what you did is you created a superhighway around the part that you make wise decisions, because you're running off emotion, what feels good, and not logic, what is actually fact.
Amen. I'm loving it. Keep it rolling.
All right. So when that happens, it's a downward spiral.
So what's next? What's the solution?
Well, the solution is that, well, you got to understand that, and every time you do that, you speed up so what you're trying to do is you're looking for, and this is why you do what you do, and I think it's important before we hit the solution to understand why you're doing it. It's not even your fault because your brain is hijacked at this point, and that's why you do destructive behaviors even though you know you don't want to.
So your brain is in a trance, is under the control of these other things.
Yeah, what it's rerouted. So you've rerouted it around even knowing. So your judgment is affected. So here's what happens: is the reward pathways. It now becomes intimately connected with our judgment and the emotional areas. And now judgment becomes distorted, and the brain now begins to treat whatever that thing is as necessary for survival. So it's the Oreo cookie, the ice cream, the alcohol, the drugs, whatever, the sex, whatever it is. I got to be at the beach. I got it. Whatever it is, it now says this is necessary for survival because you rerouted it around your area that has executive function. And now emotions are running the boardroom, to bring it back into our language. And you've totally taken the mind out of it. The genius part of your brain is totally out of it now, and it's not even your fault because what you're doing now, your brain is seeking the speedy release of dopamine. It wanted to get that dopamine as fast as possible, as intense as possible, and as reliable as possible. I've got to have it, right? And so what happens is, when you do these addictive behaviors, the dopamine can release between 2 and 10 times the amount that natural rewards do. And when you get on that, then you go down that path, and the brain is just it's like literally, like you said, this is your brain on drugs. It fries right past any judgment or logic, and that's why people do dumb stuff.
You took the word, when you said addictive, you took the words right out of my mouth, because the things that you were listing are not things that are usually associated with addictions, because we talk about substances. So those are the clear things, substances and some of the activities that are addictive. But when your decision making is affected by things, it's almost like things that are like silent killers. Like we don't consider ourselves addicted to bad decision making or bad choices because of XYZ. We always relate it to a substance or something like that. So that is interesting.
Right. And when we get back from the break, I want to talk about a more benign example of how your brain gets hijacked. You're listening to the Get Warrior Tough radio show with Andrew Wittman and the Dutch Coleman.